It is not such a great morning if you woke up this morning as a Broncos fan. The team drops to 1-4 on the season after Sunday's disappointing collapse in the second half. Where does this team go? What went wrong? We're going to dive deep into that in today's brand new episode. Good morning, Broncos. Good morning, Broncos country. Welcome to another episode of GMB, your daily bite-sized Broncos conversation and a cup of coffee, or in my case, water here on Mile High Sports YouTube page. Mile High Sports is every team, every day. For all your Colorado professional sports, some coverage of the CU Buffs. Head over to milehighsports.com for all the written content and coverage you're going to get over there, and for all the video content and engaging conversations you're going to have here on the MHS YouTube page. Do us a favor, hit that subscribe or that follow button down below so you never miss out on what's going on with Colorado sports. The Denver Nuggets season is fast approaching, as a lot of Broncos fans are probably shifting their focus toward that. And also the Colorado Avalanche are going to be back on the ice this month as well. So a lot of things in store outside of just the Denver Broncos, which unfortunately, Broncos country, it's been a rough season so far. And I think we're all sitting here talking about, coming into the year, if you would have told me that Denver was going to be 1-4, I'd be like, no, you're crazy. Because of all the moves that they've made, everything looks good on paper, right? And I always think that's where you just have to see it play out on the field. And look, for the Broncos in Sunday's loss to the New York Jets, it was the Blues. The Broncos Blues continue here, and they couldn't hack it against the New York Jets there, pun intended. This is just a continuous trend that we're seeing, and I made the analogy of it too. I was talking with somebody in the press box. The Broncos, they're having these flashes, right? Flashes in a pan of what they could be. And then they go away from that. It doesn't work anymore. They open up in the second half and they just completely collapse and falter. And that was the case in Sunday's game to the New York Jets. Denver ultimately loses this one 31-21 at home. Ugly, all the way around. There's no easy way to put it here. You look at Denver, the first half, they come out really on fire. Their first opening possession defensively, okay, hey, they get a stop. They force a punt. Nick Bonito comes up with a big sack on Zach Wilson. And all of a sudden, everyone's like, okay, hey, the Broncos defense, they got some energy. They got some juice to them, which was a great sight to see in the first half. Second half, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But then, okay, you punt the ball away. Unfortunately, Marvin Mims muffs the punt there. The Jets recover it. Denver's defense holds up, forces the Jets to settle for a field goal. Denver gets the ball in their first opening possession. They march downfield. Russell Wilson using his legs, improvising. Jaleel McLaughlin, a 38-yard run down the right sideline. And then he hauls in a catch where he catches it from Russell Wilson, goes 22 yards for a touchdown. And all of a sudden, the Broncos are up 7-3. They're in business, right? And then defense gets another stop, forces another punt. And then the Jets, they punt it. They pin it inside the 5-yard line. Russell Wilson gets called for an intentional grounding. That leads, because it happened in the end zone, it leads to a safety. So all of a sudden, we have a 7-5 ball game at Empower Field to Mile High. It was just a weird turn of events here for where the Broncos were at. It ended up being 10-5 at one point there, and then ended up being 10-8 due to a Jets field goal. But for me, it's just, you look at how Denver got there, right? They were quick and decisive with the passing game a little bit early on, though it wasn't any chunk yardage. It was the short to intermediate. Denver didn't take any shots downfield in this game. And look, I get it. They got a guy like Sauce Gardner. They got a front seven that's very aggressive. But we've seen now in two games specifically, we'll go back to week 1 of the regular season against the Raiders. We'll go here in this game against the New York Jets. The Broncos were so worried about that defensive line from the Jets creating havoc, putting them in long field situations, that they failed to go downfield. It was not in their game plan. A lot of the route concepts that the Broncos are running offensively, and I'll have to go back and reconfirm with the All-22, but they're running the short to intermediate routes. There weren't a lot of long developing deep routes that were coming up there. Nobody was available because the Jets were playing that too high safety shell there. They're rotating guys, different looks, a lot of cover 4, some cover 2 here. And at times they'd go man and they'd send a lot of pressure. And look, it just, things got away from Denver. Denver went into halftime with a 13-8 lead after the Jets were kind of marching downfield a little bit. And Zach Wilson threw it to C.J. Uzomah, who got tackled inbounds by Kareem Jackson. They had no timeouts left. They couldn't even get to the line to spike the ball to stop the clock to kick a field goal that would have made the score potentially 13-11 at halftime. And then everyone, there was a lot of energy in the crowd there from Broncos fans, and they were booing Hackett because Hackett, unfortunately, he's the offensive play caller over there. So the second half, once again, just we've talked about it here on GMB. It baffles me that Denver in their last 6 games, right, 5 games this season, the Chargers game last year, they're 6-0 on coin tosses, right? They've won the coin toss 6 straight times. They've deferred every single time since that Chargers game last year, and they've deferred to get the ball to the second half. And with that possession in the second half, they've either turned the ball over or they've gone 3 and out. Denver hasn't done anything in the second half. So part of me is just saying, you know what? You win the coin toss, take the damn ball and try to get a lead, right? Because Denver, they've scored in outside of one game this year. They've scored on their opening drive in almost in every game minus the Miami Dolphins game. I don't understand where things are falling apart here. Denver on the script, they're performing well. When they get away from the script a little bit, it just seems like they're having a hard time adjusting. And look, Russell Wilson took some shots from the Jets defensive line. This was the one game where I felt like Denver's offensive line in the first half played okay. In the second half, I just felt like it seems like they were just getting beat and guys were coming free off the right side. Mike McGlinchey really struggled on observation here, right? I always like to go back to the All-22 and watch just so I can make definitive claims. I don't want to say that this guy was in the wrong, this guy struggled here. I want to go back and see it on the film, but it wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty at all because when you look at it statistically, the Broncos there defensively, I mean, offensively, they were sacked. I think it was 4 times, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see here. Yeah, 4 times. I think it was Quinton or Quincy Williams that had 2 sacks here, 3 quarterback hits, 1 tackle for loss, 1 forced fumble. And that forced fumble he had coming off, obviously, the end late where Denver was driving in a comeback effort down 24-21. Sacked Russell Wilson. Russ fumbles the ball. You have a cornerback there. I think it was Bryce Hall for the Jets. Picks up, scoop, and score. That's how the final score came to be 31-21 here. But where did things go wrong here, right? Jaleel McLaughlin was a little bit of a fire starter for them in that first quarter, first half. And then there was nothing because Denver just continued to falter away some of their possessions to open up the third quarter. There was punt, and then it was a fumble, unfortunately, that hurt the Broncos there, and then the Jets, they capitalized. And then coming out of the second half as well, I mean, to open up, like Denver goes 3 and out on their first possession of the second half. Very first play for the New York Jets, 72 yards, Breece Hall for a touchdown. Not even touched, nobody near him, just saw it, shot through the hole, explosive, nobody near him at all. And that was really the catalyst. And once again, I think just the concerning trend that we're seeing here from this Broncos football team, it continues to be the same thing defensively. They can't stop the run. Now, I think in the first half, I will give them credit. The Broncos defense did a pretty solid job stopping the run in the first half. And then in the second half, after that Breece Hall touchdown, was just gash. He finished the game with 22 carries for $177. The New York Jets offense in totality accumulated 407 total yards of offense. Another bad sign. 31 points given up here by Denver's defense. Not a great sign, even though there was a scoop and score for a touchdown that obviously factored in, so maybe 19 points there. You look at the rushing yards per game allowed. Denver allowed 234 yards on the ground. Inexcusable. 177 that to Breece Hall. Zach Wilson was their second leading rusher with 26 yards. Dalvin Cook, third leading rusher with 23 yards. And then Michael Carter had one attempt for 8 yards there. Denver's just getting gashed to a point where they're just allowing explosive chunk plays. Now, I felt like from a coverage standpoint, Denver did a much better job in the secondary in the passing game, though there were a couple of coverage breakdowns. I saw Tyler Conklin catch a wide open pass on third down that would have helped the Broncos in that fourth quarter, and he rumbled downfield. The Broncos couldn't bring him down. Luckily, though, I mean, Nathaniel Hackett kind of got in his own way here in terms of play calling because the Jets had control of this. Denver was down there on the timeouts. They only had one left, if I'm not mistaken, and it was third down. And all the Jets had to do was run the football, and then Denver would have maybe gotten the ball back with maybe less than a minute or so at that point, at that juncture. Patrick Surtain, I mean, he decides Nathaniel Hackett calls a play for them to pass it on third down, throws a back shoulder to Garrett Wilson. Patrick Surtain intercepts it. Like, fantastic play by PS2, but Denver couldn't capitalize, right? They had a couple of plays. They marched downfield, and I was like, okay, hey, Will Lutz might kick a game-time field goal. This game might be going into overtime. And then you have Williams coming off free off the right side, sacks Russell Wilson, fumble, scoop, and score. That's all she wrote. That was the game here. So, I mean, it's just very frustrating. Look, Broncos fans, they left that game quick. Denver at one point in the fourth quarter, they were down 24-13. Fans were like, after that, like, you know what, we're done. They were leaving like it's a mass exodus. So 2 home games that the Broncos have had. And actually three home games, 2 home games. The Raiders game, they didn't have a mass exodus. 2 home games, the Commanders game and this game, fans leaving early and fans leaving in waves. And I understand where the fan base is at. Like, it's frustrating to watch because you watch the Broncos do this. And I said this to somebody as well. It's the same result every single week, right? It's, you put the lipstick on the pig, but then, maybe you make a change. Instead of just putting lipstick on the pig, you put a different colored wig on the pig. And all of a sudden, here you are sitting at 1-4. And I think ultimately where things are a little frustrating is how Denver got to this point, right? Great, solid first half. Not going to say great. Awful second half, just completely, they couldn't execute. You had guys leaving with injuries. Unfortunately, DJ Jones left the game in the second quarter with a knee injury. He did not return in that game. And then, of course, they go on and they gash Denver. I thought DJ actually had a pretty solid game in this game. Zach Allen had a sack in this game. Nick Bonito had 2 sacks, right? So there were some good performances that, unfortunately, Denver sitting here at 1-4, not going to get a lot of conversation, not going to get a lot of highlight or run here because, unfortunately, nobody cares about what you did if you lost. But Denver once again sitting at 1-4. Now you have a short turnaround, and guess what? You're playing the Kansas City Chiefs on Thursday Night Football. Ugly, ugly turn of events here for Denver. And I'd never thought that they'd be sitting here at 1-4. And of course, because of Sean Payton's comments in the offseason about Nathaniel Hackett and that going public and going viral, it was a bulletin board material. And once again, I'll just say this. When Sean Payton came in, he told us in his introductory press conference his team was going to be like anonymous donors. You're never going to hear from them. They're not going to put any bulletin board material out there. What does he do? He goes out there and he has a couple of coffees with someone in the media he's good friends with. And, unfortunately, the story gets published that, puts a lot of people, especially like people inside the Broncos organization, people who work tremendously hard. And look, what he said about Nathaniel Hackett, he wasn't wrong in what he said. It was wrong that it got out that he had said that, though, right? But he also threw a lot of people. He threw George Payton. He threw Damani Leach, who wasn't even with the team at the time, threw him under the bus. He threw the Broncos PR people under the bus. That's not a good look, right? And so now, obviously, he talked about Hackett. That was bulletin board material. It went public for a very, very good reason. And the Jets, this win, it opens up like, hey, they're having a field day on social media. You look at their Twitter handle, memes for days. You got players coming out and saying, Jets country, let's ride. You got Aaron Rodgers talking about Nathaniel Hackett. Though I'd say Nathaniel Hackett didn't really do much. I mean, Nathaniel Hackett did a lot of things that could have lost them the game. But, when you just say, hey, hand it off to Breece Hall, I mean, that's a pretty good game plan right there. But aside from all that, Sean Payton, he put his foot in his mouth this offseason with his comments. It's come back to bite him in the tail. And now he's got to take it on the chin with grace. He's got to accept that. And I think that's kind of soured, I think, the perspective now. Like, Broncos fans are kind of soured a little bit on Sean Payton because of all that talk and everything else that happened. Look, Sean, I think, has done some good things with this team, but you're seeing the same exact results here with Denver with Sean Payton that you saw with Nathaniel Hackett. Now, granted, I think Denver was at a better record standpoint last year at this juncture than they were right now with Sean Payton. So no ways to put it. Ugly. Denver, unfortunately, 3 turnovers that the New York Jets capitalized on. The Broncos for several fumbles in this game, but just simply weren't able to recover it. And unfortunately, that's kind of a story that you look at, missed opportunities. And I think one pain point, too, going into halftime, Denver had 183 yards of offense. And then in the fourth quarter, with about 9 to 10 minutes left in the game, Denver was at 185 total yards of offense, right? Because we talked about it. 3 straight possessions, 3 and out. Then you had the fumble, punt, fumble. And then all of a sudden you'll get 2 yards of offense through the entire second quarter into the fourth quarter. And then Denver got some yards, some production a little bit late after it was already 31-21 there. Denver trying to get some, movement downfield, but just an ugly game, a complete collapse here by the Broncos. And I know if you're a Broncos fan, you're watching this, you're not in very good high spirits now, and rightfully so. Denver's now 1-4, short turnaround against the Kansas City Chiefs. It's hard right now seeing how this team is playing to factor in whether or not they're going to get another win this season. I don't see it. It's very tough. They keep playing like this, they won't win another game this season. And that's a tough thing, I think, for Broncos fans to accept. But this could be a very different Broncos team going forward here, probably in the next 10 days, maybe even the next 14 days. What happens here in these next 2 weeks, I think, are going to be very, very important. And it could change the landscape maybe going into 2024 here for the Broncos. But Broncos country, I'm sorry that the team, unfortunately, could not win. Frustrating loss, disappointing loss, seeing it there live. I feel for Broncos fans that, invest a lot of time and energy. And look, the Broncos fans deserve better than what they've been getting. And unfortunately, Denver's in a rough position right now. And there's no time to hang your head and pout. Like, these guys got to go out there and they got to keep battling. And guess what? You can do it on Thursday night against who other than the Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce and company. Denver's got to figure it out, and they got to figure it out soon. But I do think Broncos country, I think a lot of change is coming your way. But that'll wrap up today's episode of G&B. Go pour yourself another cup of coffee. I'm going to go get me some as well after I drink this water. Appreciate you so much for rocking with us. We'll be back tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show.